There was a pretty good response to the Invincible characters being matched up with particular Lantern cores, and I did say if that video was received well, I was going to make more Invincible content mixed with DC properties on this channel, and that's what we're going to do today by doing what we once did with Marvel heroes and villains, looking at some Invincible characters and who their villains would be in the DC universe. Just like I did with those other videos, I'm sticking to 6 Invincible characters, but each of them will have 2 DC villains that I think they could go up against. Now, if you put the Invincible universe up against the DC universe, I'm pretty sure they are going to get absolutely smashed. I don't think there's any way they could win these battles. But for the purposes of this video, let's just imagine that Invincible exists within the compounds of the DC universe where they are much more powerful and they can go up against DC characters. So let's waste no more time. Let's get right into it. We're of course starting with Invincible himself, as probably most Invincible DC videos on this channel will go. The 2 villains I decided to go with here is General Zod and Mongol. I think when you look at Invincible and a lot of the world that they created there, Invincible would be the Superman or the Superboy of the Invincible universe. And because of that, General Zod is very akin to someone like Omni-Man. The only difference is Omni-Man in the long run actually has much more of a heart than General Zod does. Now, you could play around with some storylines in a DC Invincible world where maybe both Kryptonians and Viltrumites exist. Perhaps the 2 species have had very close relationships with one another in the past. I could see Invincible being thrown into a Superman situation where he needs to keep Earth safe from an evil Kryptonian in General Zod. Somebody who wants to take over the planet, dominate it, and turn it into a new Krypton. In a lot of ways, that's what he already has to deal with in Viltrumites. He would have the experience to go up against General Zod in that fashion. He would also have a lot of familiarity with someone like Zod, somebody who doesn't get phased at all when he's hit, somebody who's very confident and self-assured of his abilities and personality, and somebody who would literally betray his loved ones if it meant the betterment of his own people. And just like he has with his father, Invincible would know how to get his ass kicked just as well against General Zod. Then when you look at Mongol, I'm not saying they have an inherent relationship with one another in any way, but you are also looking at another conquering force. When I look at Invincible, I see someone who has grown a reputation for himself. People on Earth and other worlds would know about him. I think it's actually about how much he can get beat and he still gets up, never giving up. It's what we talked about in that Lanterns video and why he would be such a great Green Lantern wielder. If Mongol could get his hands on Invincible, bring him into Warworld, and give his people a show, having him fight all these different beings and creatures, the name of Invincible would be enough to entice interest across the universe. Once Mongol enters the picture, you have another straight up ass kicking, somebody who's just going to demolish Invincible in every way. But it still won't matter. Invincible will still get up with 2 swollen eyes, not even being able to see 2 centimeters in front of him, and that's why Mongol will love him so much. He's got everything he wants in someone being in a war world. It of course would have or meet the satisfying end when Invincible would finally regain his strength and be able to defeat Mongol once and for all. However, at the end of the day, Mark does like to find himself in situations where he gets embarrassingly beat down, and because of that, I think these 2 villains would be perfect for him. Now we go into Omni-Man. I have 1 villain for him who would actually be a hero, and then I have 1 villain for him who would be a villain because later on in his storyline, he becomes more of a hero presence. It might be a little bit of a cop-out, but I do have a reason for it. The 2 characters I gave Omni-Man are Superboy and General Zod to Kryptonians. Before I get into my reasonings for General Zod again, let's start with the Superboy. As I said about Invincible being the Superboy of the Invincible world, Omni-Man would then have a close connection to the actual Superboy of the DC world. And just so we're clear, I personally like to go with the Connor Kent Superboy. And since he is artificially made, in a sense, you could play around in a DC Invincible universe where maybe Connor Kent is half Viltrumite, half Kryptonian. So now he has ties to both sides of two extremely powerful species. Without going into too much extreme detail, because I don't think it needs it, there are a lot of ways where you could develop a storyline between an Omni-Man and a Superboy very similarly to an Omni-Man and Invincible. Now for General Zod, I know picking him twice might feel a little odd, but I had to do it for specific reasons. I almost considered Darkseid for Omni-Man, but I just think nowadays he's way too powerful for one person. General Zod in this sense is being used as a much more higher level person than Omni-Man himself. When I looked at Invincible, I saw General Zod as an Omni-Man. When I look at Omni-Man, I see General Zod as Thrag. Both of these species, Kryptonians and Viltrumites, are featuring two very powerful forces as generals of their own species in which there aren't many members left. Both Thrag and General Zod will go to extreme lengths to better their people, even if it means the destruction of entire civilizations, as we've seen them both do before. General Zod, spoiler alert for anyone who doesn't know, could be the character who does kill Omni-Man like Thrag does, just in the DC universe. When you look at Omni-Man, you think to yourself, this is probably the most powerful being in the Invincible universe. And it's not until you see Thrag where you're like, I was very wrong. It would work the same way with General Zod. Omni-Man puts up a fight. Omni-Man holds his own. Maybe here and there dummies General Zod for a little bit. But General Zod, at the end of the day, just has much more going for him. Then we look at Atom Eve, and the two characters I gave for her are Bleeze and Psycho Pirate. Just as we spoke about in that Lanterns video, Atom Eve is the closest thing to a lantern in the Invincible universe, and even though lanterns are very powerful, Atom Eve can do more than what lanterns can do. She has matter manipulation on every level, every piece of the spectrum. It's just that the way her powers are molded makes her look like a lantern of some sorts. But since she is a very loving character, she is very in tune with her emotions, I thought it would be interesting to bring a battle to her in which you had love versus hate. Not exactly sure what these two characters would have had to go through to become very close enemies. It could simply come down to a fact when heroes fight Red Lanterns, perhaps she always gets the better of Bleeze, and it just over time makes her hate Atom Eve more and more. For Psycho Pirate, I wanted to go a little different here. Since I do believe Atom Eve is so in tune with her emotions, I wanted to give her an enemy who would literally test everything about that. Also, the fact that with his mask, it even gives him other properties, like being able to create energy projectiles and to intake energy projection as well. So maybe there are cases where some of her attacks won't always do something or afflict him in negative ways. But his illusion casting, his fear projection, even the fact that he can travel dimensions under his own power and maybe toy with her and distort her reality, I think he could really get under her skin, make her overthink and stress and really lose focus on what's real and what's not, make her really get down into her deep, very hidden, shielded emotions on things she has not ever wanted to bring back up to the surface ever again, things she's chosen not to think about, things she knows she does not believe, but Psycho Pirate makes her believe them. Instead of force for force, power for power, projectile for projectile, you give her an enemy that will toy with her immensely mentally. Next up is Alan the Alien, and the two villains I gave for him are Lobo and Despero. Now I'm gonna start with the Despero one first, considering I do think he might be a little too powerful for only one person nowadays. He has been scaled up pretty high. Even if they did have to fight Despero in a group though, I still think at the end of the day, Alan the Alien is going to be Despero's main target. Both of these characters have a telepathy of sorts. Despero is far more powerful than Alan. However, they could still communicate with one another in some ways. Maybe you could do something where Alan's species and Despero's species have a close connection to one another. Very similarly, Kryptonians and Viltrumites could be very closely connected. Maybe they were great friends at one time, and now one of Despero's main missions is to ensure that he either turns his long friend back to his side or just inevitably has to kill him. I could see Despero outranking Alan, so whenever he goes up against him, he usually does need some form of backup, but at the end of the day, Alan is usually capable of getting the upper hand on him because of his help, and Despero is never capable of truly being able to defeat him. When I looked at Lobo, I see two characters who are probably going to be enemies with one another, but every now and then might even need to work with each other. I think Lobo and Alan's comedic personalities could bounce off of one another quite well, keeping things very interesting and entertaining. And even though they are enemies, I do think deep down there is something about each other that they both like. They both appreciate. Things like, this guy's all right, but he's pretty much against everything I do and everything I believe in, so whenever I see them, I gotta bring them down. Then we have Shapesmith, and I went with Queen Bee, Zazala, and Archillo of the Sinestro Corps. For Queen Bee, I thought it could be a situation of the Corlin race having run-ins and maybe even wars over history with the Martian race, in which this makes things quite fascinating. In a DC Invincible world, is Shapesmith a Martian of the nature of Martian Manhunter, or is he a different form of Martian? But that is a conversation for a different time. I think it could be very interesting that Shapesmith's particular species of Martians are grand enemies to the Corlins, including Zazala especially, and she's made it a goal to wipe out those particular versions of them. When she figures out that one has sought sanctuary on Earth, she follows him there to eventually be able to defeat him and kill him or whatever else she wants to do. And as I even said in that previous Lantern video, Shapesmith is someone who is not necessarily in control of his emotions. He's very shy, insecure, immature, somewhat simple-minded. Maybe you could even give him a fear of bees in some way, which makes it even harder for him to have to fight Queen Bee. Going along with that idea of fear, that's why I decided to go with a member of the Sinestro Corps in Archillo. I didn't want to just give you Sinestro. I wanted to give you a different character. He is just someone that I think is very fearful and has a lot of scared tendencies and nature to him. A Sinestro Corps character would be his bane. And it's very similar to Adam, Eve, and Bleeze. Perhaps this is just an instance where Shapesmith and other heroes have had to fight Sinestro Corps members many times over. Shapesmith has just gotten the better of Archillo a couple of times, and it pisses him off, and it makes him want to toy with Shapesmith every time he sees him. I would even do it in ways where Archillo is just, in general, a better fighter, a better strategist, far more suited to beat someone like Shapesmith. But for some reason, Shapesmith always finds the dumbest, most inconceivable ways of beating Archillo. And that's just what I see of Shapesmith, somebody who is literally stumbling his way through life. And then last for this video, but certainly not least of all Invincible characters, I went with the Immortal. And the two villains for him are Vandal Savage and Black Adam. Of course, in just any regular Invincible world, yeah, Black Adam is probably annihilating the Immortal. But in a world where maybe Invincible characters' power is heightened, this would be quite an interesting fight. fight, especially when you consider that Immortal is an equivalent to Vandal Savage. Maybe the Immortal and Vandal were twins. Maybe these are two characters who, when getting their powers, one went more good, one went more bad. The Immortal would have never-ending conflicts with both of these characters. No matter what he does, even if he beats them, it's never the end. The Immortal and Vandal had conflicts with one another before men could even talk. They've had conflicts throughout all civilizations of humanity, and they will have conflicts with each other when the Earth has been dispersed or destroyed. With Black Adam, there might be a little more understanding with the character from time to time. Maybe a very Alan and Lobo situation where they might even have to team up from time to time. But I think Vandal Savage and the Immortals relationship is far different in the sense that neither of them could ever put their differences aside. The world could be coming to an end. They could be getting invaded by Darkseid or any fifth dimensional being, and they would still be mortal enemies, never to trust one another. They have been through way too much and have literally existed since the beginning of mankind. There are not many ways they could fix their relationship. So there you go, DC villains against Invincible characters. There are still a whole ton of Invincible characters we could have gone through, and other DC characters that could be going up against them. For some of the ones I didn't mention, leave in the comments below who you think would be great matchups between Invincible and DC, and let me know what other videos you'd like to see that mix both DC and Invincible together. That is all I have for you on this video, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed it, and until the next time, I will talk to you all very soon.